Cool. Who's bought a Groupon? Just an amazing consumer phenomenon. But for anyone who hasn't heard the idea, what is a Groupon?
Groupon is a website where every day in about 250 cities around the world, we send people one deal on something to do, see, eat, or buy in their city. And they buy basically a Groupon or a voucher that they take to the business and use like cash.
So Forbes has called you the fastest growing startup in the history of startups. I believe Morgan Stanley has estimated your revenue this year might reach $500 million. Don't know if you want to give that a thumbs up or thumbs down as an estimate.
People are interested in that. We kind of just let them continue to be interested and ignore it.
Fair enough, fair enough. But calling you the fastest growing startup makes it sound like you were some kind of overnight success.
Right.
And actually, you were an overnight success years in the making. You didn't start as Groupon. You actually started as a different kind of effort altogether. Do you want to talk about what that was?
Sure. We started out in the beginning of 2007 as a much broader idea. It was a way for groups of people to come together and organize campaigns to solve some problem that one of them couldn't solve alone. It was called thepoint.com, and people could organize a boycott against a multinational corporation, but only once you get 1 million people to join, you take action, or a fundraiser where you try and build a park or a bike lane or something like that, but people only commit the money once they reach a certain critical mass that will help the job get done. And it was this really big, abstract idea and platform that you could do anything with. You could do collective buying with it, and that was one of the ways that people were using it. And then it was when really the recession hit that we decided we better figure out how to make money,
right,
and decided to focus in on Groupon, which was just taking one very narrow application of the broader platform and building a separate experience around that. And that was in the beginning of, towards the end of 2008, and when we launched Groupon in Chicago.
So Silicon Valley has tried collective buying. We've been burned by it. There were a bunch of startups in the dot-com boom, Mobshop, Mercado, Company, all these forgotten names. Wired had this feature where they actually talked about venture capitalists sorting through old stacks of business plans, kind of looking through them for good ideas that were discarded in the bust. How did you settle on collective buying as an idea that would really take off? Was it just the urgency?
Collective buying is only one aspect of what I think has made Groupon a successful service. If we tried to recreate what Mercado was, that would have failed as well, I'm certain. There were more fundamental problems to what they were trying to do. It was basically taking the Amazon model where you have a storefront of consumer goods, cameras and televisions that are low margin and hugely competitive with companies like Amazon and Walmart, and trying to use group buying to drive the price down over a long period of time. So, the problem they had is that they weren't able to assemble the attempt of collective, the kind of buying power that they needed to be competitive, and the price wasn't any lower. So, it was actually, I looked at all that when I was thinking about how do we, if we have this asset of a collective buying platform, how do we transform that into something that's going to be useful and is going to work?
Right.
It's kind of like we crossed that off the list of possibilities.
Yeah, you get
failed for such good reasons.
You get 50 people together to buy an iPod. Apple is not going to be particularly impressed.
Right.
So you went local, and I think 10 years ago, say, a lot of local businesses weren't ready to do a Groupon. In fact, today, a lot of local businesses aren't ready to do a Groupon. I've heard tales of businesses actually kind of getting crushed by the weight of the Groupon. What happens there?
When a business gets crushed by the weight of the Groupon?
Where they just get so much demand and they're not able to satisfy it, or they didn't, calculate their margins and, go out of business practically?
That doesn't happen. What happens is that businesses have, eyes bigger than their stomachs, and they all the businesses can limit however many Groupons they want to sell. But we've kind of created this new unheard of problem. We've created a form of advertising for small businesses that's so potent that nobody's ever had to say, well, I don't want too much advertising because I don't want too many customers.
Right.
And so people are trying to grapple with that, with the fact that sometimes you can have too much of a good thing. And we ourselves have learned how to make sure that we're regulating the number of customers we're delivering to merchants by having basically doing capacity planning for these businesses and making sure that they're not going to sell more than they can handle based on the number of chairs they have in their store.
It's another service that you offer. Now you take a very healthy cut of these deals. I've heard it reported as much as half of the purchase price. Is that right?
That is right, and we have a waiting list of 35,000 or something businesses that want to be featured. So if we were following economics,
you would raise that.
We would raise it. We would take even more.
Yeah, but you're doing a lot in exchange. I was looking at a local San Francisco Groupon. It was for a small seafood distributor I'd never heard of. So a win for them right there. They got a little awareness for free because I didn't happen to buy the Groupon that day. But the description stuck in my mind. It was so beautifully written. It talked about the benthic bounty of that this seafood seller had on offer, and I had to look it up myself. It means under the sea. Now, I'm thinking that distributor did not write that. Is that correct?
No, we write all the copy ourselves. We have a team of about 70 people just in the U.S. that are writing the copy for all the deals, and that's just been something that we did from the beginning. And we view Groupon. Part of what makes it tolerable to receive an email in your inbox every day is that it's something that's interesting to read, and you can learn about this new business in an entertaining way.
Yeah.
And so having engaging copy is a way to keep people engaged and not unsubscribe every time they see a deal that they're not interested in. So we did it at the beginning, and it's also just part of, as consumers, trying to build a product that we really like. And we've just stuck with it since.
Now you're actually not based in Silicon Valley, you're based in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking a Silicon Valley company would not do these things. They wouldn't do email, because email's not cool. You're gonna hear about a lot of email killers at conferences like Demo. They wouldn't hire writers because you're supposed to automate that. Creativity is for users to generate or something like that. So you're doing a lot of things that don't play by the Silicon Valley rulebook. Do you think you would have felt, if you'd started Groupon in Silicon Valley, do you think you would have felt a lot of pressure to kind of do things the cool, technological, algorithmic way?
I don't know if it has anything to do with whether or not you're in Silicon Valley or not. I think there's a culture here that we've seen and we continue to see with the companies that are doing local, that are coming out of the valley where it's focused on using technology to scale things. And part of that, we just didn't know enough to know that you could do something like that. Like I kind of think of starting a business in Chicago as it was similar to back in the days when I was recording music on a 4-track before I could do it on my computer with Logic, and kind of the limits of physical recording mechanisms weren't completely lifted away. Like I think it's good to operate within constraints, and starting a business in Chicago creates a lot of technological constraints that force you to be creative about how you evolve the business. Like Chicago, the birth of Groupon is very much all about having constraints. Like we started with the corpse of a failing technology platform that we had to figure out what can we do with this, and collective buying was one thing that we could do, so we had that constraint, and then we didn't have any scale whatsoever. So we decided to do one deal a day, primarily because our audience was so small that we would need to channel all of it into one product in order to get the price at a point that the merchant would be, or in order to drive enough customers to the business that it would be interesting to the merchant. So having all those constraints forced us to kind of design a business model creatively that accommodated.
Now we've actually got startups here from the Czech Republic, from Singapore, all over the world, and I think they find the fact that you started outside Silicon Valley very inspiring because they're outside the valley too. But you've been poaching some people from the valley. In fact, I've got a bone to pick with you, Andrew. You recruited one of my friends early on, and I don't like that. But you've actually opened up an office here recently, is that right?
Yeah, we have a technology office out here as well with about 25 engineers.
So obviously we're very excited that we brought this demo conference to Silicon Valley for the first time. When did you bring Groupon to Silicon Valley? What was the reason?
We brought it in towards the beginning of the year just because with where Groupon is going, there's great talent in Chicago, but the talent pool is shallow. So eventually you run out of people, and it's just so much easier to find people here. And we were trying to get people to move, and some people will move, but some people won't. And ultimately, we just decided it was easier to have offices in both locations.
And you have the scale, the resources. You have fewer constraints. You raised $135 million from the Russian investment firm DST.
Mm-hmm.
And you made a bunch of international acquisitions recently. Listed, picked up a couple.
Mm-hmm.
We at VentureBeat actually compared that to eBay's strategy, where eBay had this great idea of an online person-to-person marketplace. A lot of people around the world saw that and said, we're going to do eBay for India. And then eBay actually had to buy a lot of those companies because they got traction. Do you see analogies there? Do you feel like that's...
Sure. In fact, we bought our European company from the same people that eBay bought their European company.
Oh, that's classic.
There's a few groups of people in Europe who have elevated the practice of kind of identifying powerful business models and cloning them to an art form.
Do you feel ripped off when that happens? I mean, you have to hand these guys some equity, right? Or
I do, but I mean, it's a weird conflicting thing where, I mean, especially at first when I saw people ripping off Groupon, it was like, are you serious? You just copy it exactly like that? Like, that was a learning experience.
Down to the web page sometimes.
Yeah. So, and then, but with some of these, when they're bringing it to new territory, I guess I rationalize it as being a little bit different.
Right. I mean, the truth is they were there, you weren't. You didn't have the resources to expand at the time. So
thank you.
Yeah. So, what do you think? What do you think consumer startups do wrong when they build their products? I mean, we see a lot of thought put into the product, but Groupon did something really interesting in that you thought about how you're going to get the product out there. Tell us a bit about how you did that exactly.
Well, I can tell you some of the things that we did wrong with The Point, which is my real experience at fucking shit up. What we did wrong was, first of all, taking way too long to launch the product, thinking, like, having this grand vision of that was something I dreamed up while in public policy grad school, which is not exactly the type of place that you want to be thinking of ideas for a consumer web startup. And just making it too complex. Like the difference, the Groupon is all those mistakes realized, where the basic value proposition of Groupon is something that consumers can understand in less than a second. Like, it's stuff that I like to do for cheap. I understand why that's interesting to me. In fact, even the whole collective buying part of it is something that we've kind of pushed into the background, and it was designed that way on purpose. That when it just looks like a deal, and then it's only once you buy that we say, oh, by the way, we still need another 30 people in order to reach the minimum threshold for this deal to be available. So we kind of progressively disclose that and don't let it get in the way of people understanding the core value. The other thing, when we were trying to grow The Point, was not really having any idea of, or having no way to get traffic to stick. We had no real marketing plan baked into it, and we tried a number of things, but it wasn't part of the core idea of the product.